Hello and welcome to the Fireside Chat with Jen Ellis. We will begin the program momentarily.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Jill Stratton, and on behalf of the Vanderbilt University community, I would like to welcome you to our Fireside Chat with Jen Ellis, making meaningful change out of mittens and memes. Before we get started with our Fireside Chat, I am delighted to welcome Vanderbilt University's Chancellor, Daniel Diermeyer, who is with us this evening and who would like to share a few words. Welcome, Chancellor Diermeyer.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for the kind introduction. And it's great to be with you tonight. And a special word of welcome to Jen Ellis, who will join us today. And we're delighted to have you with us. It's not every day that we can spend some time with somebody who created a cultural phenomenon, or as we now call it, a meme. And also, I think, is using this opportunity to do good in the world and transform it into a moment for positive change. So welcome to Vanderbilt. And thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to hand it back over to Jill. I'm going to turn off my video so that I can listen in quietly.
All right. Thank you so much, Chancellor Diermeyer. It's so great to have you with us this evening. So as I mentioned, I'm Jill Stratton, and I'm Assistant Provost for Experiential Learning and Associate Dean for Residential Colleges here at Vanderbilt. Tonight's Fireside Chat is sponsored by the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, the Residential Colleges, and the student organization Vandy Votes. We had a chance earlier to meet some of the students, and Jen got a chance to meet them. It was really fun. A special note of gratitude to Vice Provost Vanessa Beasley, who first suggested that we invite Jen to share her story and who came up with the title for this great program. So Jen, I am just so excited to welcome you. I know you're zooming in all the way from Vermont, and as I'm sure everybody on the webinar knows, Jen is the person. She's the person who made the mittens that Senator Bernie Sanders wore and made famous on Inauguration Day. So we're going to spend the next maybe 30, 40 minutes just talking. We're calling this a fireside chat. I think you actually have a fireplace where you are, and I do too, but you get the picture. Jen's going to talk a little bit about the story behind the mittens, her reaction to the memes, and in fact, she's going to share some of her favorite memes with us. And she's going to share how she has found meaning in this moment in history. We'll also save some time at the very end to have some questions, and we have a fun giveaway. So hello, Jen. Welcome to Vanderbilt University, our Fireside Chat. It's so great. I have so many questions for you.
Hi, Jill. I'm so excited to be here. I'm totally flattered that you wanted to talk to me. And I'm here from Essex, Vermont, Essex Junction, and I can't wait to talk.
Well, I know the students primed you with a couple of questions, but before I launch into my questions, and the way I've organized it is to talk about the mittens, to talk about the meme, and to talk about meaning. But before we go into that, will you tell us a little bit more about your story? I like to get to know people by name and story. We know your name, and some of your story has come out through MSNBC and Good Morning America and NPR. But tell us just a little bit more about who you are, maybe where you grew up, what you're doing now, a little bit about your family, maybe what you studied in college.
Sure. So I grew up in South Portland, Maine, and I went to the University of Vermont, where I was an English major and a political science minor. I graduated in 2000, and I joined Teach for America right after I graduated. And I taught in rural North Carolina. I taught high school English for 2 years, which was an amazing experience. I actually sometimes say that I learned just as much through that experience as I did in my college experience. It was so formative.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back to Vermont, and I've lived here ever since. And I went back to school and got a teaching license to teach elementary school, and I'm a second grade teacher. I've been teaching in Vermont for 15 years.
And let's, we actually know each other. And the funny thing is, Jen, we only know each other from a computer screen. I've never met you in person, but we have actually, can you tell a little bit, just really quickly? I think it might be fun to know how we met each other.
Well, we met through the Tilt Circle, which is Things I Love Thursday. And it's a gratitude circle. I was looking for something during the pandemic to be grateful for. And it's important to take some time to think about that, especially during the pandemic. So we have a mutual friend, Jenna, and she invited a group that we're part of to attend the gratitude circle. And so I started showing up once a week for half an hour just to think about what I'm thankful for.
Yeah, it was so fun to meet you. And I'm so grateful to Jenna Limbo for introducing us. I know you met Jenna at a songwriting retreat. And so we've been meeting weekly. I know sometimes you can't Zoom in because you're teaching, obviously, but there may be some people tonight that are cheering us on for gratitude, generosity, and joy. So speaking of joy, these mittens, okay. I mean, I know you've shared about this, but okay, tell us about the mittens. How did you end up giving the mittens to Senator Sanders?
Sure. Well, I brought some props. So here are some mittens. And I make the mittens out of wool sweaters, repurposed wool sweaters. So I take a wool sweater that might have a moth hole or somebody sent it through the wash, and I cut it up and I mix it with other wool sweaters that are complementary, and I turn them into mittens, and I line them with fleece. This one's kind of funky on the inside. And they're very popular, especially in Vermont, because it's cold here.
Yeah, they look very warm.
Yeah. They're warmer than gloves. That's a public service announcement. Your fingers actually need to work together in order to stay warm. And I have been making mittens for 7 or 8 years, maybe a few more. Actually, definitely more, maybe more, close to 10 years. And my daughter attended preschool at the Essex Hollow Play School that just so happened to be owned by Bernie Sanders' daughter-in-law. And the Christmas or the holiday season after he lost the nomination, the Democratic nomination for the presidential election in 2016, I was making mittens for my daughter's preschool teachers. And I was just thinking about Bernie and how bummed I was that he didn't win. And at the time, I thought that he was going to retire. Okay. So I made him these mittens kind of as a retirement gift. That's, as we know, not what happened. But I knew he liked to walk. He's a big walker. And I gave them to the director to give to Bernie. And then I mostly forgot about it. That's the thing that's so funny is this all shocked me. It shocked me that he wore them to the inauguration. And I had a little bit of forewarning because a year ago, something similar to this on a much smaller scale happened when he was wearing them on the campaign trail. So I had a little buzz about it then. And I went on Twitter to sort of see what people were saying. I was curious. And I left my email. I mean, at the time, nobody knew who I was, and I did have some mittens for sale. So I left my email in one of my tweets, probably like the third tweet I had ever done in my life. And that was that. I sold the mittens I had, and then this year I didn't do any craft fairs because I had done some craft fairs where I sold the mittens. It was a little bit of a side hustle, but I didn't do it this year because of the pandemic. There were no craft fairs. And I also pretty much had planned to stop doing it because I have a job, I'm a teacher, and I wasn't really going to pursue it anymore.
So I did. Okay, so I did hear, and you are so gentle when you're interviewing with, I think it was on the BBC, and they said something about that you had knitted the mittens, and you gently corrected and said, actually, I sewed the mittens. You told people how you made them out of the repurposed sweaters, that they weren't knit. So that was interesting. And then, the other thing you told me is that you gave him the mittens, 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, and you had kind of forgotten. So now kind of walk us through Inauguration Day, Wednesday, January 20th. where were you? Kind of walk us through, where were you when you learned he was wearing the mittens? How did you learn about it?
Well, I was in my classroom in Westford alone because it was a remote teaching day. We've been doing remote teaching on Wednesdays, and our students have come the other 4 days of the week because I teach really young kids. And so I was alone in my classroom, and I was Zooming with all of my students from their homes. And my phone started to ding, and I ignored it because I did have this thought. I was like, oh, I should have muted my phone. I really didn't know that those dings were letting me know that my life was about to really change. So finally I got up and checked my phone, and I had a number of text messages. The first one I saw was from our school librarian, who was just like, Bernie Sanders is wearing your mittens at the inauguration. And I was like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
But even that.
And then, so then the next 24 hours must have been just wild. I mean, in terms of, and then I guess that's the mitten piece. Now we're kind of going a little bit into the memes. Do you remember the first meme that you saw? Do you remember anything about that first 24 hours that you can tell us about?
Sure. Well, so that was a half day of teaching, and I came home just as soon as I could because I wanted to watch the inauguration with my family. We were very excited for Kamala Harris to be the first female vice president, and we had purchased cupcakes, and we pulled our TV out and we actually don't really watch much TV. So we had to take the TV out of the closet, and we had bunny ears all set up. Like, it was a big holiday for us. We were so excited about the inauguration. And so we were watching the inauguration, and my partner just kept pulling up these memes on her phone, and they were just funny. I think the first one I saw was the one of the Empire State Building with Bernie on the top of, on that beam. And then the one that I loved right away was the Mean Girls one. That was just so funny, where Bernie was sitting in the cafeteria. And so it was very funny, and it was surprising. Of course, you could never predict that something like this would happen.
Right.
But then reporters started calling, and I was wondering, like, how are they getting my phone number? But it's pretty easy to find people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we gave an interview. My daughter and I actually gave an interview together, which now in retrospect, I regret a little bit because I've tried to keep her out of the spotlight. But at that moment, I had no idea where this was going. Like, I could not have predicted this was going to happen. And later, when I looked at my email, there were already 6,000 or 7,000 emails just in the first few hours. People had found me on Twitter, and they were emailing me asking for mittens, which I don't make anymore.
Right. Well, when we talked with the students earlier, you had mentioned that you, in about 24 to 36 hours, you had almost 18,000 emails. What was going through your mind? I mean, what were you thinking? Like, what in the world? I just can't even imagine.
Well, it was stressful because I am a people pleaser, and I wanted to make the mittens for people. I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. I don't have the time to do that. And I didn't necessarily want to spend all my time making mittens.
Right.
I want to spend my time with my daughter while she's little, and with my partner, and with our dog. I have other things I want to do.
Right.
So I did not want to disappear into my craft room and just make mittens. So I began reaching out, looking for partnerships. And Vermont companies stepped right up, and they were like, we want to partner with you. Vermont Teddy Bear is going to make the mittens for everyone. They're totally equipped to make mittens. They have all of the sewing machines, and they have very, very talented staff. They're a local company. They employ my neighbors. I mean, it's just it's a huge win. And so I've been working with them and their design team, and they're sourcing materials right now, and they're going to make mittens for everybody who wants them. So if you want mittens,
right? Well, I do want some mittens. So I will. Now I know where to go. But before one of the things that you you have really used this moment in time to amplify good and generosity. But before we get to the meaning part of this, I do want to share out some of your favorite memes that you sent to me. And it was fun because that was actually one of the questions that the students, when the meet and greet, they asked you about. And so I'm going to share my screen. So do you want to start talking a little bit about some of the I mean, really, and also, can you maybe talk about some of the interviews? I know you were interviewed by NPR and the BBC and Good Morning America. Will you talk about some of those experiences while I pull up the memes?
Sure. So Ari Shapiro interviewed me on public radio, and that was just like, I mean, he's kind of one of my heroes. So that was a really big thing for me. And the BBC called me in my classroom. They really wanted to talk to me. They you know, my classroom phone number is actually probably the easiest way to find me, because when you Google me, well, now I come up as Bernie's mitten maker, but before I came up as a second grade teacher.
Okay.
And so people were calling my school, calling the secretary, asking, you know, my secretary's like, she's teaching spelling right now.
Yeah, right.
She's not available. I know that you're the LA Times, but she's not really free right now.
It's really funny.
Yeah. And so let's see. I've done interviews with radio stations and podcasts.
That's so cool.
There were a lot of TV interviews.
I think just like the chancellor said, this is quite a phenomenon. I mean, it was really, I have to tell you, I was actually sitting with my mom in Louisville, Kentucky a few weekends ago, and Willie Geist, he's actually a Vanderbilt alum, and he does the NBC, like Sunday early morning Today show. He does the thing called Highs and Lows. And he talked about, you know, the Bernie Mitten memes, and he mentioned you by name as a second grade Vermont teacher. And I said to my mom, like, I know her. And then, and that was really fun. And then there's another interesting story that maybe we'll come back to as it relates to the meaning about your grandfather and my mom, but we'll get there. So this is, I think Bernie was on everything. He was on cookies, he was crocheted. And at the end of this fireside chat, we're going to draw the names of 2 Vanderbilt students to do a giveaway. But let's talk about some of your favorites. This is people, I bet many people have not seen this one. Tell us about this one.
So this is the home ec room in my hometown, in my middle school, where I actually learned to sew. My middle school home ec teacher was Jeanette Collette. And I don't think they really teach home ec anymore, but this was a class where we learned how to operate a stove, how to wash dishes, wash clothes, iron clothes, cook, use a knife safely. I mean, so many practical skills. And this is where I learned how to sew, and I loved it. And so my mom bought me a sewing machine, probably for my birthday or Christmas or something, because that would have been a big gift. And it's that same sewing machine, that Singer sewing machine that I got probably in 1989, that I sewed Bernie's mittens on.
All right. It's a now famous machine. Well, I love this picture, and I love that Bernie visited your home ec room. So he, you know, Bernie traveled quite a bit with these memes. He was in outer space. You just
Saturn's my favorite planet. I mean, yes. I'm sorry, Mars, but
right.
Okay, that one's good.
This one's very, very Vermont. Is this what y'all are doing right now?
That is definitely an activity that you could participate in right about now.
Okay, and just like all the pop culture references, right?
That's the movie where you're not supposed to.
Right.
I love this one down in the corner with the wild cat, because that was clearly captured on somebody's like outdoor camera or wildlife camera.
Yeah, or it reminds me of that lawyer that says, I am not a cat. Tell us about this one.
Well, this meme, I really wanted to see Bernie with the Dowager Countess, and I couldn't find one of these memes. So a friend of mine made this meme for me, because here's a secret. I actually don't know how to make memes. I probably could figure it out, but it's not something I've ever really done before. And I still don't really know. So
well, and this is lovely. And the funny thing is, I think when I texted you, I'm like, you're on NBC, the Today Show. And you texted back, you're like, I really wish I owned a television so I could see it. I was like, that's really funny.
You do have a television.
I know, but you never turn it on. Okay, tell us, I know you're a big Hamilton fan.
I'm a huge Hamilton fan. I mean, we bought a projector, an outdoor projector for the summer, so that we could project Hamilton outside on our front lawn. Wow. With a big screen with all of our neighbors, you know, at a social distance in their own driveways watching. So Love Hamilton.
Yeah, well, and many of the students mentioned that as a favorite earlier tonight, and so glad that Bernie Sanders finally got cast. And then here we go.
Oh, love Harry Potter.
I know. It reminds
Bernie
me,
must not have gotten the house that he wanted.
yeah,
He's like,
my
"Oh,
nephew, yeah, my nephew's a big Harry Potter fan, so this was a fun one. That was really fun. And then he just, yeah, he showed up in all kinds of movies.
Yeah, I love The Sound of Music, and of course E.T.
We've got,
and Central Station. I think that's what that one is.
yeah, and then
Central
the
Station in New
Queen's
York.
Gambit. There we go.
And the Queen's
Tell us
Gambit.
about this new piece of artwork.
Well, Bernie, I don't actually know the name of that one. I probably should. It's very famous.
It's a great, he was
Yeah.
really, and then of course Bob Ross, he got in some
Oh,
paintings,
yes,
and
The Scream.
quite famous. So these were some of your favorites, and some of the students mentioned, and then Vice Provost Beasley mentioned the prints. We'll have to share that one with you, because Bernie Sanders showed up in the bathtub with Prince, and that was exciting. And did you see the one with Ghost? Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, I thought that was a little creepy.
Yeah, it's a little creepy. Yeah, it's a little creepy. So I'm gonna stop sharing our screen here, so we can get back to. Okay, here we are. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, you mentioned that you didn't want to make mittens for the rest of your life. You didn't want to open a mitten factory. So talk about what has this moment been like for you? Like, how has it caused you to think about your life? How did you get the idea to start this idea of Generosity Brings Joy? Maybe before we jump into that, I know you did a couple of auctions for some organizations in Vermont. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I really didn't know what to do when this happened.
Yeah.
But every time I took a step in the direction of opening a little cottage industry or making a wait list for my mittens and selling them for a huge profit, I just felt bad. Like my entire body was like, no, don't do that. And then when I took a step in other directions, like making mittens for charity, I felt good. And so I just had to listen to myself in that way. I love the movie Frozen 2. My little daughter loves to watch that. And there's a great song sung by Anna where she sings, just do the next right thing. That's like it might be the name of the song. Yeah. But I kept thinking about that. Like, I just want to do the next right thing. I don't have a plan. And it was a little scary. It was really scary, actually. So many people knew who I was. People were calling me and emailing me. And, I was afraid that this would turn sour. The internet is full of trolls and people who just don't have your best interest in mind. So the first thing I thought of to do is to make some mittens, because I can still make them. So I made 3 pairs of mittens for charity. Well, 2 were for charity and 1 was for my daughter's college fund. And I called up Outright Vermont and I offered them a pair of mittens, which they gladly accepted.
And tell us about Outright Vermont. What is that?
So Outright Vermont is a queer youth organization here in Burlington, in the next town over, Burlington. And they run a youth group for GLBTQ youth. And they also do a ton of outreach. Like they're just a wonderful organization. And I know the director from college. So I was like, hey, do you want a pair of mittens? And like their organization was so on top of it. They made a website. Other people started donating stuff to the auction too. And then the person, after a week, the mittens went for about $7,500, I think. And the person who won them donated them back. He paid for them, donated them back so that they could double their profits, which was it was such a great thing for him to do. Yeah. And he offered a match grant of $10,000. So in a week, they made $10,000 more dollars, which was matched. In the end total was $44,000 that they made.
That's incredible.
Yeah, from the mittens and what came from that.
It's really neat.
Probably one of the greater benefits was the outreach. The director, Dana Kaplan, said that this was phenomenal outreach. It was all over the news. Like everyone in Vermont was following this. Yeah. And there are a lot of queer kids who just may not have known that Outright existed. And I was very intentional about saying, this is a shout out to you. I know you're there. I know that the pandemic has probably been hard for many of you. I'm a lesbian and my parents were super supportive, but there are lots of kids living in homes where they're not supported, they're not accepted for who they are. And to be stuck in a home with people who aren't
Right.
supportive of you would be a very terrible and difficult thing. So I was very intentional to say, like, I know you're there and I see you and I support you. And
Yeah.
hold on, it won't last forever. So
That's
another one of
huge.
the mittens that I made that first weekend went to a dog rescue. We have a rescue dog. And so
What is your dog's name?
Danny.
Danny.
He's what they call a Southern special. He came up on a transport from Alabama, and he's a great dog. We love him, and
Awesome.
I wanted to do something with animals.
That's
The
awesome.
third one was for my daughter's college fund, which, sadly that auction actually fell through. It was on eBay, and the lead bidder was a boy, a 12-year-old boy who later was like, his dad was like, he hacked into my account. And I was like, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm a parent, like, I'll delete your bid.
Yeah.
And then, I tried to list them again. It just didn't work out. So
I
still
think,
have that.
the idea that things unfold in ways that we can never imagine. One question that that kind of came through as we're talking was this idea about Bernie, because Bernie Sanders also used the meme to raise some money for Meals on Wheels in Vermont. So my understanding, and the question was, did Bernie Sanders reach out to you directly after the meme started spreading? If so, how did it go?
Yes, he did. He called me about a week later, and he called me to tell me that his campaign's fundraiser, which was a sweatshirt with the Bernie image on it, had raised $1.8 million.
Wow.
For Meals on Wheels Vermont.
Incredible.
Which I didn't really have anything to do with that fundraiser. That was run by his campaign. But my own grandmother got Meals on Wheels. And she was living, before she died, in Guilford, Vermont, a rural town on a dirt road. And 3 times a week, the Meals on Wheels folks would come and bring her a healthy meal and make sure she was okay. So and she's been gone for a long time, but it just made me so glad that they chose that organization. Because that's another group of people who've been very isolated in the pandemic. Seniors have just, so many of them are afraid to leave their homes, and they're losing out on these wonderful, this wonderful time at the end of their lives.
Right.
So I was really excited about that.
Well, one of the things, one of the questions that came up was a little bit about the fame that you, a person, and I think it's true. You have stayed incredibly humble and grounded during this. So one of the questions came, how do you stay humble in the face of so much fame and recognition?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that I'm famous for this and not for something bad. Like, if you're going to become instantly famous, may it be for a gift you gave.
Yes.
So that's nice. I also know that this isn't going to last forever. And I loved my life before this happened. And when this passes, I just want to go back to living my normal life. Yeah. So I don't really have any delusions that this is going to last forever. At first, it was very stressful. I definitely put on a smiley face and talked to the media, because I knew that if I didn't tell the story, someone else would tell it, and they wouldn't tell it right. Like they would put in details that were incorrect. They already had. Yeah. I mean, people had said that the mittens were knitted by Bernie's grandmother, and that he had gotten them for Christmas. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things wrong with that. Bernie Sanders is Jewish. His grandmother died a long time ago. Yeah. The mittens weren't knit by me.
Right. Right.
They were knitted. The sweaters were knitted many years ago by somebody else.
Right.
So I felt the need to kind of correct some of these things and take charge of the story, so that it stays focused on what the story really is about. Is this was a gift. That's it. It was a gift. And if that was the first domino in this very long chain of events, that is a very long domino chain. The end result was millions of memes. There was one meme generator that has shut down now, but he counted almost 10 million memes just from his one site alone, which is astounding. It is, and
it's an incredible story. And I think one of the things it reminds me of is being kind and generous, and being unattached to the outcome. Giving for, and you really, Jen, before even the Bernie Mitten memes and the Bernie Mittens, you lived that. One example is you sent me a jar of honey from your bees. You sent our friend Karen. So you, in fact, just this week, this is a true story. Jen said to me, there's going to be something that comes in the mail. It won't be identified that it's from me. And I opened this book, opened this package. I knew immediately it was from you, because the thing is, this fame hasn't changed who you are, the heart of who you are. It's amplified the good that you've done in the world. You told NPR's Ari Shapiro that, quote, at the core of it, I'm still a public school teacher and I'm dedicated to that. Can you talk about, a lot of people said, hey, Jen, take this, take the money and run, cash in on this, follow your dreams. Talk about how that plays in with your being a second grade teacher and how much you love that.
Yeah, I mean, I do love my job. And also in the middle of a school year, you can't just be like, peace out, second graders, like I have a commitment to them, to teach them.
Yeah.
And during a very difficult time, like this has not been an easy school year.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been very isolated. We can't interact with other classes. I can't really interact with other teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my students and me, like we're just together all day and we support each other and we have formed this wonderful community. Even if it weren't in a school year like that, I wouldn't just leave my students.
Right.
That's just not something that teachers do. And also I'm part of a teaching team. I have all these wonderful colleagues and, they're my friends. I would just never leave them high and dry. So that was never a question. I was never going to leave my job. It definitely made it interesting when reporters were calling me and they were like, when are you available to talk? And I was like, I'm available after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's after I put my daughter to bed. But before 9:30, when I'm like every teacher falling asleep.
Right, yes, that's right.
They're like, you only have a 2-hour window. And I was like, well, I have a 30-minute lunch break. And the BBC was like, we'll take that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Another question that came up that's related to this is, where does your drive for service come from? Have you always been focused on education and giving back? We're curious about your motivation.
Yeah, I mean, so back to the idea of selling the mittens, like some people were like, you should charge $1,000 per pair of mittens and make a waiting list. And, there were lots of people who had so many ideas. But in the back of my head, I was thinking people should not spend $1,000 on mittens, not when our neighbors are hungry and people are suffering and people can't make their rent. And this is a time when there's so much need.
Yeah.
And also, as a public school teacher, I see children who are living in families that are food insecure,
Mm-hmm.
Who are moving around, who are sometimes homeless. It's just there's so much need in the world, and my needs are met. I mean, I never lost my job in the pandemic. I continued to. My partner didn't lose her job. I'm so fortunate, but not everybody has been that fortunate. So I think that I've always been a person who, I like to think about other people and their experience, and I know that the experience that I have, and all of my privilege, is not the experience that everybody is having. And so I just try to keep that in mind. And I'm so excited that this mitten thing has been kind of branded as something that you can do for charity, because lots of places are making mitten themed products. Like there's a brewery in Vermont that made a mitten beer. They've done 2 runs of it, and it benefits, I think that also benefits Meals on Wheels. There's a maple syrup company that's doing a run of 1,000 jars of maple syrup with a special Generosity Brings Joy label.
I love
it.
I love
that's
it.
going to benefit Camp Tecumseh, which is a camp for kids who've survived or who are living with cancer here in Vermont. And then of course this talk.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tell us about this.
So this talk is going to benefit the Parkinson's Foundation, which is very close to my heart and yours.
Right. Yeah.
Which we didn't even know.
We didn't know. I mean, I was talking to Jen on the phone, and we were, I knew about your work with the Queer Youth Violence, the Prevention Center. I knew about your love of animals. And then one of the things you said I'm really passionate about is you're like, my grandfather had Parkinson's disease. And what you didn't know is that my mom is living with Parkinson's disease. So we immediately connected. And I also know that you're planning to write a book to talk about your life. And I hope it's okay to mention where some of those proceeds would go that you're thinking about, either National Parkinson's Foundation or Michael J. Fox, because again, wanting to give back. And one of the things that inspires me about you, Jen, is this, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do one thing. And you've done so much in this to amplify this good. So talk a little bit about some of your future plans. I mean, you've got this book idea. I think you're working with a few other nonprofits. So tell us more about that.
So I have continued. I mean, those first auctions were so wildly successful that I have made some other connections with other nonprofits. Right now, for example, Steps to End Domestic Violence here in Burlington is doing an a raffle.
Cool.
And that's to support they have a new living space where people who are, escaping domestic violence or just getting back on their feet after a domestic violence situation, they can live in an apartment style space while they figure things out. So that raffle is going on right now. And if people want to check that out, they can. I also partnered with this amazing artist in Pennsylvania. Here, I'm going to show you some of his.
Oh yeah, show it. Yeah, I know you've got a few things to show us.
I do, but so he's been painting woodland creatures.
Ooh.
In the Bernie pose. This one is actually wrapped in plastic.
Okay.
And I know there's another one that I'm going to let you show later, Jill.
Okay. Yes.
And he's just a great artist. This is not in the Bernie pose, but his name is Sam Georgieff.
Okay.
And I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to do a fundraiser together? And he was like, yes, I love wildlife. And I was like, so do I. So we did a joint fundraiser. It's over now, but we raffled off 2 pairs of mittens. One was for a wildlife rescue near where he lives in Pennsylvania, and one was for the Green Mountain Animal Defenders, which is near where I live here in Vermont. And he also raffled off some of his art and agreed to give a portion of his art sales to these organizations. And then it inspired him to paint a whole bunch more. I mean, he's now done a deer and a bear. So if you want to check him out, he's at Bernie's Woodland. He's an amazing artist. And also, now this is the great thing, Jill.
Okay.
I've made some awesome friends in this. So Sam Georgieff is one example. And I teamed up with Darn Tough of Vermont, the sock company. And they made a mitten themed sock. They did a special run.
I ordered several socks and sent them to people.
Sold out overnight.
Yeah, they're
and
so cool.
They were able to make, they donated 100% of those proceeds to the Vermont Food Bank.
That's incredible.
Another organization that has just been called upon like more than ever during the pandemic for food insecurity. People were living with food insecurity. And that connection just keeps growing. I mean, the people at Darn Tough, first of all, I've taught many of their students.
Yeah.
But I've also just met more people who work there, and they're amazing people, and they live not very far from where I live. There's just new friends, Well,
that's great. And Jen, you are just such a ripple of kindness and generosity. And one of the questions that came up that was emailed to me in advance of this chat from somebody, a student, what's one thing that you recommend for people to do to create positive change, regardless, social change? How do we're living through, you mentioned it. It's hard to be a human being right now. There's so many things going on, but you've done so much, and it sounds like it's been a ripple for other people to do good and give back. So do you have something, especially, there's a lot of college students that are listening in tonight, but there's lots of other people, all kinds of people listening. What's a recommendation that you have to create positive social change in the world, or maybe right where we are?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that, when you think about positive social change in the world, it sounds so big and it sounds so not accessible. So I'd say go small, start small. Somebody told me when I was in college that I should write more letters to my grandmother. And I'm so thankful that I followed that advice, because when she died, she had a desk full of letters that I'd written to her. She'd saved every one. You know, those letters meant so much to her.
Mhm.
And there are other things, especially right now, just get to know your neighbors, right? Like we're all kind of stuck at home. This is a
Right.
great time to learn the names of everybody who lives around you. And you may find that some of them have needs that you didn't know about.
Right.
For example,
right.
last summer, my daughter and I went wild planting our garden. We planted so much stuff, more than we would ever eat. So I put it out on a local listserv. I was like, does anybody need vegetables? And so many people reached out to me
Nice.
that I went back onto the local listserv and I was like, does anybody else have a big garden? And I was able to connect people who needed vegetables with people who had big gardens. And I was able to connect with several people in my community who are blind or disabled, with a neighbor who's in her 90s.
Mhm.
And I just was able to give them some vegetables. We had so many, and it was just a wonderful way to share. There's so many things you can do if you look
Right.
around to see what gifts you have.
Mhm.
It
Thank you
doesn't
for
have to
sharing.
be
Yeah.
material things.
Yeah, and it
It
also
can-
doesn't have to, like you said, what strikes me is it doesn't have to be big. That we can have
Yeah.
micro moments of positive change and generosity and gratitude and joy. Speaking of generosity, you know, I know you're a second grade teacher. One of the questions that came in from the chat is, how do you teach generosity to your second graders?
Well, we started doing gratitude circles in my class, and I know that the connection there might be hard to see, but when you start feeling thankful for what you have, you
Mhm.
recognize the value of the non-material things more.
Mhm.
And so when we do gratitude circles, my students are now thanking each other for playing with them at recess, or for sitting with them on the bus, or for just like smiling at them, or
Yeah.
helping them clean up the crayons they spilled. You know, there are all these ways that you can be generous with your time and with your kindness and with your words that don't really have anything to do with the material things that you have or don't have to give away.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I start with them. And a really funny thing that's happened as a result of this is, like I said earlier, one of the ways to find me before was through my teaching. Like I was online as a teacher, and here's where I teach, and here's the address of my school. So people started mailing me things at school, funny things. But it's happened so frequently now that my students are like, what'd you get today, Miss Ellis?
It's like the teacher's the show and tell, right?
Well, and you know, they're generous, and they've written me
Yeah.
these lovely notes to thank me for, you know, for just inspiring them to make things or inspiring them to be generous. One of my favorite things was this one company actually already was making wool products,
Mhm.
and they sent me a card shower. These are all the people who got jobs. They reached out and gave all these people jobs so that they could sew products. You know,
Wow.
and the notes just made me cry. They were like, I didn't have a job and now I do. And they were like, thanks to you. And I'm like, actually, no, like I didn't give you that job. I'm glad that something I did a long time ago inspired this movement, and now you have a job. But these notes were so kind. And then I've gotten funny things like this. These are
What
earrings.
is that? Is that like, are those earrings?
They're earrings. I can't say that I've worn them yet, but I think they're really cute.
They're very cute.
This is something I got actually today. This is a sponge holder.
Wow, I did not even know those existed.
Me neither, but it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
now my sponge can dry out.
Is
And
it made of ceramic? Can you hold it up one more time? Is it
Yeah,
a ceramic?
it's-
I want to see somebody made that for you.
somebody made this for me and sent it to me.
Love it.
And this amazing artist in New York he makes collages out of
Uh-huh.
cereal boxes.
Wow, you've
So-
gotten some cool stuff.
Yeah, he sent an enormous tube of art, which I kept a few pieces, but I put them out on the table in the teacher's room. And so lots of teachers got some great art from
Nice.
that. People have sent me, like publishing companies have sent me books for my classroom, and people have been very generous in me. And so so I've talked a lot with my students about like why would people want to do that, you know? And
Yeah.
and that's the root of it. It's like generosity does bring joy. It brings people joy to give
It
things to me.
does.
and it gives me joy to give things to other people.
I was going to say,
And,
it's almost like it goes back and forth. Generosity brings joy and joy brings generosity. One of the things that I do with my nieces that are 5 and 7, I've been doing kind of a gratitude journal when I'm in town in Louisville, and we'll write it in this little book. And then last time I was there, I said, okay, let's do our gratitude journal. And the 5-year-old says, is that what we're thankful for? And I said, so it's like you can teach young people, second graders, kindergartners, about the principles of generosity and joy and gratitude. So speaking of, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. I have a few more questions for you, but speaking of generosity brings joy, can you tell us a little bit more about this movement that you're starting? Tell us how it's going to, how you got the idea and what you're doing with that concept.
Sure. So I actually thought of the words generosity brings joy in a sleepless night. Like when this first happened, it was very hard to sleep. I was up a lot at night, just sort of tossing and turning, and it was stressful.
Right.
And the words generosity brings joy were sort of running through my head. And so I thought, that's really what I want to name this.
Mm-hmm.
That like really it was just a gift. And it brought joy to people in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, like people all over the world were laughing about this, and it wasn't at anyone's expense. I mean, Bernie thought it was funny too.
Right.
And I loved that. I loved it that it was just something that people could laugh about from all walks of life, right? It transcended politics and religion and nationality, and we all could have a moment of joy in this very stressful time. And so I ended up having to hire someone to help me. I hired a media manager who is actually a friend of mine who was a travel agent, and her business is on hold because of the pandemic. And she has lots of great media skills. She set up the website for me. She set up a GoFundMe because I also had to hire a lawyer. I ended up hiring 2 lawyers. I hired an entertainment lawyer to help me manage some of the offers that I was getting for books and films and things like that. And I had to hire a local business lawyer to figure out how to turn this into something. So I ended up actually making a little business, but because I needed somewhere for this to land that was outside of my family's finances in life, so I have a website. It's generositybringsjoy.com. And on that website, I talk about all of the different fundraisers that I'm doing and the partnerships that I'm forming with companies. Right now, I'm working on a partnership with the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce, which I hope will spill over to the Department of Tourism in Vermont, because I think this would make a great tourism campaign. Like, welcome to Vermont, home of the Bernie's Mittens. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Now that we can travel again, I can see on the horizon that this is where, this is going. The pandemic's going to end and people are going to want to travel.
Right.
So I'm in conversations with them, and I've also been talking to Ben and Jerry's. I don't know where that's going to go.
If I just have to say, if you get an ice cream flavor, I want to be the first one to buy the ice cream, and I will ship it to everybody on the webinar. Ice cream is my joy.
I think Ben and Jerry's is a little bit of a harder sell because it's hard to think about like mitten flavored ice cream. But the colors of Bernie's Mittens, they're very ice cream.
Yeah, they're very inspired.
Dark chocolate.
Well, so I love that you have. It's like this movement, and so I've got one more question for you, but or maybe 2 more, and I want to bring back the screen to share it because it's gonna see if we can get this up. So we did talk about this already. Let's go. So I wanted to, so Vanderbilt is very famous for our squirrels. And I know your artist friend made this, and I have to admit, I've already purchased 2 of them because I think they're awesome. So that's the, shout out to Vanderbilt and our very friendly squirrels. But I wanted to ask you a question. As I mentioned, there's a lot of college students that are on the call. And one of the questions I often like to think of is, what would I tell my 20-year-old self? I mean, like you mentioned, Jen, we're living through a pandemic. There's so much strife in our country, the racial violence, the racism. people feeling lonely and isolated. And so, I know you're a University of Vermont alum, and I think there's a funny story kind of about these two photographs, but I guess I wanted to ask you, if you could say something to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? And can you kind of set up these two photographs, please?
Yeah, sure. So that is my 20-year-old self right there, and my 43-year-old self next to it, and photographed not very far. I mean, just kind of in the same building outside and versus inside. And actually maybe photographed by the same photographer, because the photographer who took the pictures of me last week on campus has been there for a very long time. And she didn't necessarily remember this picture, but she said, I would have taken a picture like that, which was for a recruitment brochure. So yeah, what would I tell my 20-year-old self? I mean, so many things, so many. I jokingly said to you, Jill, I would tell her not to buy that Subaru Forester because it was a lemon. Like if only you could go back and tell yourself to avoid these little pitfalls in life. But I think the big thing I would tell her is you don't have to know what you're going to do. You don't have to have it all figured out. Those people who are just telling you you need a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and you know what? You don't. And you can just do what Anna did in Frozen and choose the next right thing. And if you don't have a great big plan, you will live your way into that plan. You'll live your way into whatever feels right for you. And then if you find that you're doing something that you don't like or that isn't true to who you are, there's never a lack of opportunity to regroup and rebuild. And I always tell myself that, like, you don't have to settle for what you have. You can change, you can try new things. And another one of your questions, Jill, which you haven't asked yet, maybe I'm going to jump the gun by saying this, is that I've actually done a lot of work in the last couple of years of my life. I was so busy as a mother and a teacher and a partner, and I really hadn't had a lot of opportunities to reflect on my life. And so a couple of years ago, I was thinking about, what I wanted to do something. I wanted to shake things up. And so I went to a creativity retreat with Jenna Limbo and Katie Curtis, and it was on the coast of Maine. And it just changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to step outside of my life and really reflect on how it was going. And at the time, I have to say, I wasn't actually psyched with what I saw. I had let go of so many things I loved. Writing poetry, I hadn't done that in years. I hadn't written a song in 10 years. And my life had gotten a little stagnant. And so I very intentionally started moving in the direction of being more creative. I started a poetry and songwriters group in my town. I started trying to eat more healthy. I started going for long walks. I started doing things that just made me feel better about who I am and gave me more opportunities to reflect, right? Like that metacognition is very important. And if you're not thinking about your life and maybe writing about it or ruminating on it, you're probably missing some of the important things. So over the last couple of years, I've actually, I joined the gratitude circle with you, and I've made these intentional changes in my life so that, of course, I had no idea that this was all going to happen. But when it did happen, I actually was a lot more sure of who I am. I am a lot more. And it was easier for me to choose the life I have because I had vetted it a little bit more than maybe a couple years ago.
Yeah, it sounds like you set your intentions, but you're also, I love what you said, that we can always reinvent ourselves. We can always come back to, and that part of life and exploration, failure, if you will, those hard things, that makes us who we are. And you are just such an example of amplifying good in the world. And I'm just so glad that you shared your story with us tonight. I also know that you're writing a memoir. You're going to continue to share your story. And, so two things before we kind of wrap up this webinar, and I do wish we were all together, and I hope that you'll be able to come to visit our campus. Vanderbilt is a beautiful campus with an amazing community. And we would welcome you and your partner and your daughter to come visit. Now, I hear Nashville's a great music scene, but I wanted to say we've got some cookies to give away. We have a Bernie Sanders crochet doll. And so I actually, I did the drawing. And so I was like, can you drum roll, please. The two people that win our drawings for the cookies, it's Julia Schmidt. Congratulations, Julia. And then for the Bernie Sanders, the crochet doll, which I love, that is going to go to Aaron Wong. Congratulations, Julia and Aaron. We will email them both tomorrow to get their addresses and get their gifts to them. And then as we wrap this up, I was thinking, Jen, speaking of generosity and gratitude and joy, I thought it would be really neat. I mean, one of the questions was, how can we make a difference? How can we make a positive change? And I love what you said. It doesn't have to be some great thing where 10 million people see your meme. I mean, it could be, but it could be getting to know our neighbor. It could be, helping out one of our wise elders who may need, our assistance. It's maybe just be seeing each other. And so my invitation, and Jen and I talked about it ahead of time, is that as we wrap up this fireside chat, is that we invite you to do an act of generosity, one kind thing for somebody in your life in the next week. And perhaps, maybe they could write us and tell us about it. I mean, you've got a website. I don't know if there's a place for people to put any greetings on there, or I just think that would be awesome. What are your thoughts, Jen?
Yeah, you can email me at jen@generositybringsjoy.com, which you can also find on my website.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear about it. I love to hear the ways that this has inspired people. And one of the particular ways that I'm interested in generosity right now is just the generosity of spirit. That somebody shows up late to something, or somebody bumps into you, and instead of just like being annoyed, just be like, you know what, it's okay. Like,
yeah.
So it's giving someone the benefit of the doubt, giving people a little space to be imperfect. That's an amazing kind of generosity that we definitely need more of, and that really doesn't take much to just take a deep breath and be like, I don't know what that person's story is, and I'm going to assume that they're doing the best they can. That is a huge act of generosity.
And that just served as a cosmic Post-it note to my heart. That is called kind of the generosity of grace, and you called it the generosity of spirit. And you have been so generous with your time to share your story and to be with the Vanderbilt University community tonight. And I just want to say thank you, really from the bottom of. We didn't know how this was going to go, and I'm delighted that people got to learn more about you. We got to amplify generosity brings joy. And really, like you said, Jen, it did bring so much joy. It was really, really wonderful. And thank you, Jen. Everybody's kind of writing a few things in the chat saying it's so wonderful to see you and to meet you. Yeah, you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And thank you so much for inviting me, Jill. This was a wonderful opportunity. I've never done anything like this before. And I really love talking to you. So at the very least, I was like, well, I could just hang out and talk to Jill for an hour, which, I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and I loved it. And
to everybody else whose faces I can't see, I'm so flattered that you're here and that you wanted to hear my story. And I'm, it's really good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And I just want to thank again the student group Vandy Votes, our residential college program, and the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, with special thanks to Christina Cunningham, who did all the logistics for this webinar. She's amazing. And then also Vice Provost Vanessa Beasley, who first suggested this. And also our Chancellor, Chancellor Dearmeyer, had a chance to say hello. What an honor to have so many wonderful people on this fireside chat. And Jen, thank you again. Generosity brings joy. And here's the true story. Jen Ellis, you bring joy.
Oh, Jill, you do too.
Okay, thank you so much. Hope everybody has a good evening and continue to bring generosity and joy to the world. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.